Do you remember the moment when you first put on a mask that you didn't take off for years? You received this mask at school, and it brought with it a shadow of precision, results, grades, and the ruthless notion of usefulness. School became a maze where you learned to function instead of exist. The clock ticked incessantly, and every sound echoed in your soul, which longed for peace and freedom. From the very beginning, the system left no room for your true nature. The break with the soul begins early, when the mask of man is placed on the face of a child who does not yet know his image in the mirror. Carl Jung said that separation from the soul is a wound that does not heal quickly. It is a silent pain that accumulates in the corners of the heart and surfaces at moments when you think you no longer feel anything. In this maze of rules and requirements, no one taught you to listen to yourself. How can you trust that silent voice of your soul which cries out but is drowned out by the noise of the world? Do you know that this voice is your true guide? A guide that takes you out of the illusion of success and the obligation to meet expectations, leading you to the place where real life begins. Your existence has been reduced to a function, not to the fullness of existence. Punctuality was more important than your inner rhythm, results more important than your feelings, and evaluations more important than your soul. This systematic symphony of indifference resounded without interruption, and you danced to a tune you had never chosen. But now, as you read these lines, something within you is slowly awakening from its lethargy. This voice, repressed for years, is beginning to vibrate like a ray of light flickering in the darkness. It is the beginning of a process of self-discovery, stepping out of the shadow of the system and searching for your soul. Because even though no one taught you to be yourself, your soul has never forgotten who you truly are. It is not your job to be a useful cog in the machine. Your job is to return to your truth, to the source that knows no judgments, deadlines, or demands. It is a journey through the dark corridors of a labyrinth where your true reflection awaits you, untainted by the light of artificial expectations. Are you ready to take off your mask? Will you allow your soul to take control of your life? Only then will you truly exist and not just a cog in the wheel. Only then will the system lose its power over you. Imagine that your value is a house that is not built of stones of authenticity, but of paper banknotes representing the functions you have to offer the world. Every skill, every piece of work you do, every goal you achieve is a brick in this house, fragile but visible. The system sees you as a service provider, a machine that produces results. It doesn't ask you, who are you? But what can you do? Your soul, that silent guardian of your inner secrets, is here only a shadow that does not appear in the world's assessment. When you begin to measure your worth by what you give, you lose sight of your essence. You no longer listen to your inner fire, which no longer wants to burn for external rewards and confirmation. Jung said that modern man is often condemned to a function, reduced to the role he plays in the system, out of touch with his soul and his true self. What you give, whether it's results at work, productivity, status, or material success, has become your label, your evaluation, and in this label there is no room for authenticity, for the true depth of your personality. Many of us feel a deep sense of alienation, as if we are spectators of our own lives and not participants in them. Instead of saying, I am, we say, I do. And just as a shadow follows the body, the shadow of this simplification follows our soul and darkens its light. Think of a time when someone appreciated you solely for your achievements, when what you created was more important than who you were during the creative process. It was as if you had traded your soul for the system's banknotes, which never gave you a real sense of security or value. The system teaches us that value is a commodity. It must be renewed, obtained, and constantly proven. This cycle never ends because the system is not looking for you, but for your function. But the soul, that invisible and infinite part of you, cannot be reduced to a task or a result. In this continuous game for value, many lose themselves in the search for recognition and do not realize that with every good result, their inner fire slowly dies out. Man becomes like a puppeteer who forgets to hold the strings of his soul. Jung observed that true value does not come from outside. It is not the function we perform, nor the result we achieve. True value comes from contact with the soul, from self-awareness, from the courage to be yourself, despite the expectations of the system. It is time to break the chains of judgment that bind you to the role of provider and discover who you really are, independent of roles, labels, and the judgments of others. Because only when you understand that your value does not depend on what you have to offer, but on who you are, will you be able to build your house on a solid foundation, your soul. It is not an easy path because it means confronting the dark sides of your personality, fear of rejection, loneliness, and confusion. But only by entering this darkness can you find the light of your truth, which will not be extinguished under the weight of the system. Are you ready to stop being a product of the system and become yourself? Will you allow your soul to shine again, no matter what the world says? Because only then will your value be eternal, and you will truly live, not just exist. Imagine a world where your questions are dangerous and your conscience is a threat. The system that wants to control you does not want you to wake up, because then you will become a difficult piece in a puzzle that is not so easy to control. Jung repeatedly emphasized that true awakening begins when you start to question the rules that hold us back, the roles that are imposed on us, the puppet theater we play in. Loyalty to the system is the price you pay for apparent peace. It is an invisible rope that you put around your neck so that you do not have to face the truth. Because the truth liberates, but it also destroys the old structures that have built your security. That is why the system rewards obedience, the tacit consent to be a cog in the machine, to ignore the signals of your soul and to close yourself off from the unknown and uncomfortable. Loyalty to the system is in fact betrayal of yourselves. It is like wearing a mask that presses harder and harder on your face and tightens the noose around your neck. Every act of submission is also an act of censorship of your own conscience, because conscience brings freedom, and freedom brings chaos, and the system wants order at any cost. When you enter this labyrinth of loyalty, you may feel safe. But are you really living? Doesn't your soul cry out for freedom and try to break free from its harsh chains? When you start asking questions, why? Is this really what I want? What is the truth? The system reacts immediately. It punishes, rejects, discourages. But it is precisely in such moments that the seed of awakening sprouts. Consciousness is the light that reveals the shadows of violence, manipulation, and illusions. The system fears the light and therefore makes sure you don't see it, but you are not just a product of these structures. You are a human being who carries within you the infinity of the soul, a space that the system has never been able to understand. This struggle between loyalty and conscience is the eternal drama of humanity. You can choose the path of obedience and security, but this is a path of exhaustion and self-denial. Or you can risk waking up, even if only for a moment, to break the algorithms, take off the masks, and look at your shadows. Awakening is an act of courage, a rejection of external control, which allows you to meet your own soul. When you begin to question the system, its successes and values, you begin to find yourself. And although this path is difficult, full of uncertainty and loneliness, it is precisely there that true freedom is born. Jung said that the path to oneself is a descent into darkness where you discover shadows you have ignored until now. But only there, in the depths of the labyrinth, will you find the light of your truth. And once you have found it, no external force can manipulate you anymore. The system needs your loyalty because consciousness means freedom, and freedom is a threat to the system. But you have the right to choose to remain in a safe illusion or to begin the process of individualization that leads to true freedom of the soul. Are you willing to doubt, to question, to wake up? Only then will your conscience no longer be a prisoner of the system and become a light that will illuminate your path to your true nature. Fatigue. This word follows us like a shadow that grows with every hour of our life in the system. This is not ordinary physical fatigue, which can be overcome with a cup of coffee or a short break. It is a fatigue that penetrates deep, envelops the body and soul, and surrounds you with an empty silence that says more than 1,000 words. It is not weakness. It is a cry from the soul that refuses to play in the theater of lies. In the labyrinth of the modern world, full of obligations, deadlines, and expectations, your soul begins to die. Every must without want is a new stone in the wall that separates you from your true self. Burnout is a fire that burns not only the body, but especially that part of you that longs for a true, deep, and authentic life. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, about the aspects we repress, about the emotions and needs we suppress in order to fulfill the roles imposed on us. This fatigue is a shadow that rises from the depths and can no longer be ignored. It is the soul, saying, "Enough, I can't pretend anymore. I don't want to be a tool. I want to live." But how many times do we ignore this voice and cover it up with more obligations, caffeine, or escapist behavior? Burnout is like a crack in the porcelain surface of your personality. Thin, but impossible to repair with the same means that destroyed it. It is a sign that something is dying inside you, but also that something new can emerge if you have the courage to look inside yourself. Sometimes fatigue is not a lack of strength, but a lack of truth. You don't need more effort, but peace and quiet in which to hear yourself. You don't need new deeds, but forgiveness and space for your soul to breathe, free from the restrictions of the system. The system doesn't know this language, the language of self-love, the language of recognizing your limits. For the system, you are a machine that must function, produce, and consume. But you are much more than that. You are a space of light and shadow, dreams and fire, a depth incomprehensible to calculations and algorithms. Your fatigue is therefore a sign that something is dying within you. Old patterns, false beliefs, masks you wear to survive. It is an invitation to wake up, to begin a process of individualization that Jung called the path to perfection, an encounter with the soul. Do not be afraid of this fatigue. Do not look away from this emptiness that seems to swallow you. There lies the seed of true transformation. It is a sign that you have reached the limit beyond which freedom awaits you. The courage to stop and look at yourself with love is the first step towards healing. It is the moment when you cease to be a victim of the system and begin to consciously shape your life. When your soul can speak and you listen to it, fatigue is no longer a burden, but a path. Remember, you are not weak. It is the system that does not respect your essence. Your fatigue is a cry from your soul that wants to live, to truly live, and not just survive. And although this path is difficult, it is the only path that leads to freedom. In a world where everything is subject to the rhythm of the clock and ruthless algorithms, the soul seems like a wild bird that never learns to dance in a cage. The system, with all its coldness and mechanization, cannot understand what is invisible, ephemeral, untamed. It leaves no room for the soul, because the soul cannot be planned or predicted. The clock ticks tirelessly, measuring minutes of work. Productivity and control, schedules, deadlines, obligations, these are the cogs of a machine that knows no mercy for spontaneity and leaves no room for peace. The system demands order, predictability, results, while the soul lives in chaos, in a labyrinth of emotions, intuition, and mysteries. The soul is like a fire burning in the human heart. It cannot be put in a box, programmed, or evaluated. It is unpredictable, wild, and full of surprises. The system tries to tame it with rules and norms, but it is like trying to catch the wind. If we live by the rules imposed by the system, we lose touch with the original spark that gives us life. The silence that fills the space of the soul is covered by the noise of daily obligations and needs. This silence is not empty, but full. It is the place where truth and authenticity are born. Without soul, life becomes a dry calculation, a colorless repetition of actions in which man becomes a function instead of a being. It is like wandering through an empty labyrinth where every step is a sound of emptiness. Jung said that true life begins when we encounter our shadow, our hidden and untamed side. The soul needs space for these encounters, for self-compassion, for forgiveness, for awakening. The system cannot provide this because unpredictability is a threat to the system. When you give your soul space to breathe, you give yourself the right to spontaneity, to emotions, to mistakes, and you begin to truly exist. it is a real awakening that the system tries to suppress because a free soul is unbeatable. Realizing that the system leaves no room for the soul is the first step towards freedom. It is an invitation to overcome the limits that restrict you and find your own path, even if it leads through unknown and dark corners of your deepest self. Do not fear silence, do not fear emptiness, because it is precisely there that the soul has the opportunity to develop. In the space between the impulses of the system, in the pauses between tasks, true life is born, full of meaning and depth. Remember that the soul is free and that you are its guardians. In a world planned down to the smallest detail, your existence is an act of rebellion, an expression of life that cannot be reduced to an algorithm. You have the right and the duty to protect this space where the fire of your soul burns. Imagine wearing a mask so heavy that with every step you take, you feel its weight on your soul. It is not a physical burden, but an emotional one. The burden of pretending to be someone else. The burden of not being who you really are. The most destructive thing is not what you do, but who you have to become in order to do it. The system doesn't ask you who you really are. It asks you what role you have to play, what mask you have to wear so as not to arouse suspicion. The protective mask you put on in front of the world was once a shield. It protected you from rejection, pain, and loneliness. But over time, it has become a prison from which you cannot escape. Pretending that everything is fine, that you feel fulfilled, that you are happy, is not a game. It is a struggle for survival. Inside, you feel an emptiness that grows day by day, because the more you try to live up to expectations, the further you move away from yourself. Every lie you tell yourself, every silence of the truth, closes the door to your soul. But it is the soul that truly lives. Within it burns the authenticity that cries out for freedom. Hypocrisy is a vicious circle that you enter as if into a labyrinth with no way out. You try to be someone who never knows fatigue, disappointment, or loneliness. But the system does not see your truth, it only sees the outer image, a mechanical automaton. And even if you can work for hours on end, the hardest fatigue comes from within, from constantly wearing a mask. Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden aspect of our personality that we often try to repress. To pretend is to ignore this shadow, to try to lock it away in the darkness for fear of its power. But the shadow does not disappear. It grows within us and feeds on our subconscious. The most exhausting thing is not our external life, which is a game of appearances and consumes energy. What really requires strength is being someone you are not, constantly adapting to expectations that are not your own. It is like dancing on a tightrope over an abyss where any moment can lead to a fall. It is worth asking yourself, how many years have you lived under the yoke of appearances? How many times have you hidden the truth within you for fear that the world would reject it? This attempt is not a sign of strength, but a cry of the soul for help, a call to wake up. When you start listening to your shadow, when you allow yourself to take off your mask, you will discover that true power does not lie in pretending to. Be perfect, but in the courage to be yourself, with all your shadows and light. This is true liberation, not from the system, but from the illusion you have created in order to survive. Do not fear fatigue, it is a sign that your soul longs for truth. Pretending is not your path. Your path begins where you allow yourself to be complete, without masks, without falsehood, without illusions. Imagine, the clock is ticking incessantly while you remain in place, chasing a fleeting shadow of the future. Just a little more, you say to yourself, just a little more, one more step. The system keeps you alive with this promise that at the end of this road, a reward, satisfaction, and happiness await you. But have you ever thought about what the end means in this context? From an early age, we are taught that life is a journey full of goals: to pass exams, find a job, start a family, buy a house, get promoted, retire. Each stage has an after, the moment that should bring relief and meaning. But what if that after never comes? What if you realize that you have lost yourself in the pursuit of the system's promises? Carl Jung would say that you have lived without being yourself, like a shadow without light, like a character in a theater mask with no real face. All your life you have been on stage playing a role written by someone else. And now the urgent question arises, was the reward you were promised at the end really yours? In this system, time is a cycle that cannot be interrupted. Just a little longer becomes an eternity, and you float on the surface without ever reaching the depths of your existence. The illusion of then is a deceptive labyrinth in which every step leads to a new weight, and the soul is silent, covered by the noise of the outside world. The promise of a reward is a control mechanism. The system teaches you patience, obedience, and self-sacrifice. Work hard, you deserve it, it says. Hold on and you will be rewarded. But this reward is not happiness, it is just a new goal, a new illusion. Life thus becomes a race without a real purpose. Somewhere deep inside you hear that silent cry. Your soul is telling you that this is not what you want, that life is not a list of tasks to be completed, but a journey whose purpose is to be, not to arrive. If you neglect yourself to meet the expectations of others, you will slowly die while still alive, because the real reward is not an external trophy, but awakening to your own truth. The system does not allow you to stop and look inside yourself, because then the truth could shake its foundations. It promises you a reward so that you never see what is really happening, your soul lost in this whirlwind. Meanwhile, time passes and later becomes too late. Ask yourself, do you really want to wait for a reward that may never come? Isn't it better to live here and now in truth, with courage and awareness of your soul? Because if not now, then when? And if not you, then who? In the quiet of the night, when the city lights go out and your mind calms down, a question keeps you awake. Why do you still feel empty, even though you have fulfilled all your expectations? You work day and night, adapt to rules, carry out projects, build your life according to pre-established patterns, but something inside you is silent, as if all this hustle and bustle were just a shadow of real life. The system promised you happiness, but it didn't give it to you. Why? Because that was never its intention. It is not the system's job to create free and fulfilled people, but to exploit them, control them, and turn them into cogs in a machine. In a world ruled by algorithms, deadlines, and illusions of success, the soul that needs freedom, space, and truth is reduced to the role of an invisible prisoner. It's like an old painting, a candle flame burning under a glass cover. The light is there, but it can't spread. Similarly, your soul shines somewhere deep inside you, but the system won't let it shine. If you were truly happy in this world, you would already feel it, wouldn't you? You would have already found peace, joy, and meaning. But that has not happened. The emptiness that surrounds you is not your failure. It is the echo of a wounded soul crying out for freedom. Instead, you only hear the voices of the system, pressure, judgments, expectations. They create a false mask that you wear to survive. And beneath it, depression and feelings of worthlessness arise. Carl Jung said that the soul seeks its own reflection, a mirror in which it can recognize itself. But the system doesn't offer such a mirror. It only creates false images that distort your true nature. And as long as you do not realize this, you will wander in a dark labyrinth from which there is no escape. Wake up, stop for a moment and listen to the inner voice that has been trying for so long to be heard through the noise of the outside world. It is your soul calling you to wake up, to live truly, and not a substitute for life. Remember, the happiness you seek is not a product of the system. It is a gift that comes when you give up your illusions and start living in accordance with your truth. Only then will the flame of your soul shine in all its beauty, and you will attain the freedom you so long for. Have you ever thought about who you really are when you take off the mask that the world has forced upon you, when the voices of others fall silent and you are left alone with your soul's reflection? In a world that constantly demands you to be a link in a chain, to function like a machine, it is easy to forget that your existence is more than just a function you must perform. The system, with its cold precision and relentless rhythm, tries to fit you into a program that must function, not exist. It tells you that you are the sum of your roles, your successes, and your duties, that these determine your worth. But this is a trap, an illusion that separates you from the truth of your soul. Because you are not the strategies you devise, the plans you execute, or the illusion you must maintain for others. Your soul is a living fire, a flame that dances to the rhythm of your dreams, desires, and ambitions. It is the true center of your being, which wants to express itself without compromise or restriction. If you ignore this flame, you give up dead patterns and die, even if you are still alive. Every day you move further away from yourself and become a shadow of the person you could have been. But when you start listening to yourself, when you dare to let go of the world's expectations, something wonderful happens. You rediscover the taste of real life, the freedom to choose, a breath full of meaning, the peace in which your soul can dance without limits. It's like waking up from a long sleep where everything was fake and unreal. Imagine you are a tree. It doesn't matter how much fruit you produce or how many leaves you have on your branches. What matters is your roots, whether they reach deep into the ground, whether you drink from the true source of life. If you neglect your roots, your leaves wither and your fruit is weak. The same is true for you. If you don't nourish your soul, nothing from the outside can fill that void. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the path to the self, which requires courage to face your dark sides so that you can discover and accept your true self. This is the key to an authentic life, full of meaning and inner harmony. It is not an easy path, but it is the only path that leads to true rebirth. You are not part of the system. You are a living being with a soul, dreams, and an inner flame. When you understand this, you begin to truly exist, not just function, but live. Imagine an old car whose mechanisms are creaking from overuse. Every movement means wear and tear. Every rotation brings it closer to the end. That is exactly how the system treats people, not as living beings, but as tools that must perform a task and then be replaced by others. The system destroys you step by step, day after day, until your strength is exhausted and the sparkle in your soul fades under the weight of monotony and expectations. But there is room for a spark, a decision that can change the course of things. The last word belongs to the soul, that invisible inner force. It decides whether you give up this exhausting work or find the courage to stop, change course, and take another path. A path towards yourself, towards freedom, towards the truth that the system never wanted to show you. The soul is not a product that can be planned, described, or controlled. It is like a fire in the heart that can burn even in the deepest darkness. Sometimes it is enough to throw off the heavy burden of expectations to start shining again with a clear and vivid light that illuminates your path. This moment of pause is not a failure. It is an awakening, the first breath of freedom that has always existed within you, but has been stifled by the rhythm of the system. You can allow yourself to be yourself, even if it means leaving a comfortable but suffocating trap. The choice is yours. You can lose yourself, exhaust yourself completely, become a cog in the wheel, or you can be reborn by listening to your inner voice and reconsidering the meaning of life. Carl Jung spoke of the power of the soul, of its unshakable strength, capable of breaking all chains. This process is not easy because it requires courage, the courage to look inside yourself, to accept your dark sides, and to set out on a path that lies beyond the limits imposed by the world. Do not let the system destroy you. Let your soul be, reborn in the light of truth, in the freedom of existence. It is not just a decision, it is your last line of defense against losing yourself.